those details in just a moment. We are also going to focus on implementation specifically related to the CDA, or the constrained device application. So all of the work we do today will be focused in Python. All the work we do next week will be focused in Java, and then actually going forward with CoAP, or constrained application protocol, where I'm going to talk about both implementation approaches. So you can actually choose when we get to class number 8 and 9, whether you implement your server in Python or in Java, and then your client in the corollary, basically the other language. All right, cool. So I am monitoring chat. I will do my best to kind of keep tabs on what you all are asking in the chat window. So if you have a question as we go, just drop it in here and I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. All right, but before we do that, I do need to top off my coffee. So hopefully that will be, there we go. I actually have this great new thermos that keeps everything nice and toasty, so I can enjoy hot coffee throughout the entire lecture, which I'm really excited about. Background music's too high. Absolutely, let me fix that. Ooh. There we go. All right, how's that? All right, perfect. Okay, thank you for that feedback. Always open to that. And by the way, I want to also stress something else. In my book, chapter 6 has been up online for some time. I made some tweaks to it, and there's some other things that we're going to cover that I talk about in the preface, or the introduction to part 3. And you're actually going to hear a lot of different kind of perspectives on things called MQT topics, and how do you name them, and what types of conventions to use, and so forth. And the guidelines are generally pretty focused on a couple of principles, but you'll also hear opinions that basically drive one particular set of naming guidelines towards one particular platform or another. I'm going to focus on what the spec says, and not what a particular commercial implementation recommends, because it happens to work with their environment. But that being said, there are generally well understood practices, and we'll get to that in just a moment. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that I'm actually going to blast through a quick review of all of the exercises and their UML solutions, as well as some notional end-to-end designs, which I'm going to give you a pre-read of, because I just finished writing chapter 12 of my book early this morning. And so I actually have some new diagrams that I'm going to show all of you as part of this lecture, so that you'll get kind of some early view into that. Okay, so what to expect? This section, as I mentioned, this whole section is all about connectivity, but more importantly, it's about connectivity options. So what we're going to learn about over the next 4 classes is how to connect different systems together using different protocols and mechanisms. It's all about giving you the choice to select the protocol that makes the most sense for your particular application. When we get to the semester project, you can actually choose whether you use one of these protocols or both of them. In fact, there are other protocols that in some cases other students have chosen to implement. One's called OPC UA, which we briefly discussed last week. And so one student for their semester project actually chose to use that particular protocol in their semester project, which was really awesome. So we all got to learn a bit about that. You can certainly choose that, but as an additional protocol. But for this course, you do need to select at least one of the 2 protocols that I'm going to be talking about over the next 4 weeks. All right, so method 1, as far as options are concerned, right? These are choices that you have, is to use a publish subscribe protocol, or PubSub. The CDA and the GDA both serve as clients to a server. They provide messages, publish messages to the server. The server then distributes those messages to any subscriber. And so I'll talk a little bit more about what that means in a moment. But basically, you can think of it the same way as like you basically ordering something at takeout. You publish your request, your order, and then you're waiting for that notification. So effectively, you're subscribing to the result of that message, right? So it's kind of this interesting paradigm, but that's kind of how it works. So for the CDA, for instance, it will publish its sensor data, its system performance data, but it will subscribe for actuator commands. And yet the GDA will say, I want to publish actuator commands because it will basically make a decision about what the CDA should be doing. And yet it will subscribe to those sensor messages and those system performances messages from the CDA. So kind of an opposite paradigm there. Method 2 is a request response. Actually, method 2 and method 3 are both request response paradigms, meaning one of the systems, one of the applications will issue a request and expect a response back from the other, which is acting as the server. So in one case, the GDA acts as a server and the CDA is a client. It will say the CDA will say to the server, the GDA, I want to get the latest actuator command. And the GDA will respond with whatever that message is, or it will say, I don't have anything, so wait. And so there are lots of ways to basically make that work in a kind of asynchronous manner. And I'll talk about that when we get to that class. The opposite is where the CDA, actually, the constrained device app, acts as the server, and it allows the gateway device, or frankly, any other system that's permitted to access the CDA, to issue requests to maybe retrieve that latest sensor data or system performance data and post or put a command like an actuator command. So there's lots of ways to make this work. And this whole section is about giving you a choice, basically. So we're going to learn about all these different things. And at the end of class number 9, you're going to have a pretty good idea of how you want to move forward, I think. And so class number 10 is some implementation exercises, like how can you make this work with this and so forth. So chapter 10 or lab module 10 is all about integration options. And that will help you understand better which protocol is going to be more effective for your particular needs. But I believe that when you get through chapter 9 or lab module 9, you're going to have a pretty good idea of like which one is easiest for you based on the ideas that you already have in place. Okay, so you can certainly choose, kinda, but you do have to implement the lab modules. So let's unpack this for just a moment. Lab modules 6 and 7 focus on publish, subscribe. So lab module 6, class number 6, chapter 6 in the book is today. So I would highly recommend that you read through the introduction to the part 3 in my book, as well as chapter 6 in its entirety, because that is going to give you the substance that you probably will need to understand how the MQTT protocol works and how to actually implement the exercise. Chapter 7 is the same, except it's focusing on the gateway device application. Lab modules 8 and 9, like I said, they're focused on a request response, and you can choose whether you're going to implement your server in Java or in Python. I focus on Java, but I'll also give you a lot of tips on how to do it in Python. And lab module 9 is the opposite. Basically, you choose which one you're going to implement your client in. And I'll cover both, but we're going to focus on the Python client. And there are reasons why I do that. And I explain this actually in my book. So you can read through all of this stuff. Actually, I just realized that chapters 8 and 9, which I finished and are going to production next week, you probably don't have access to. So I will explain my justification, my rationale for why I would actually choose one over the other when we get to those classes. And then, like I said, lab module 10 allows you, actually focuses on both. So you do have to implement both, but you have a choice as to how you're going to implement your server. That's really the point I'm trying to make. Okay, so what this all means, folks, is if everything goes well, and let's assume that you have the maximum degree of success on these lab modules, which I fully am confident you will. I'm pretty sure you will. Then most of your lab module 10 effort, not all, but most, will be centered on your device data manager. That's because you'll have the underlying infrastructure to pass messages to and fro built, already constructed, and you can simply select in your configuration file which one you're going to use. You set a flag that says, I want to enable my MQTT client, or I want to enable my CoAP server. Now, of course, you can get things weird and you can set all of the flags to true, and then your application needs to kind of figure out how to interpret that. That I will leave up to you. The thing that will be different, which will actually influence the connection type itself, is we'll be introducing encryption in Lab Module 10. So that will actually impact your connections, but the core business logic that actually facilitates the messaging, or rather the interpretation of those messages, will be focused on your device data manager. So the good news there is that once we get through all of this complex connectivity stuff, you're going to get to focus on just your business logic, which will take us into Lab Module 11 and 12 as well. All right, let's move to the next thing. Let me ask you all this. How are you doing with this conceptually? Because one of the questions that comes up every semester is like, well, do I use one or the other, or do I use this other thing? And again, it's a choice for the most part. I want to make sure that you're all comfortable with, what I'm communicating. Are there any questions at this point? And you can respond in the chat, if you could please, with a no, all good, or good, or if you're a gamer, you can respond with GG, and I'll understand that. I learned that from my son. He used to text GG in the game chat, and I'd be like, what does GG mean? Is that a typo? So anyway, all right, cool. All right, so I got like literally 4 of you, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm assuming the rest of you are snoozing, or are just not paying attention. Anybody else on this call? No? All right, so I think what we've got here, we've got literally 5 people. Oh, 6. Okay, awesome. All right, cool. So stay with me, folks, because I'm going to blast through a bunch of solutions. Okay, so I'm assuming that you're all interested in seeing what the end state detailed design could look like for your exercises, right? This will help you solve for your lab module. Everybody want to see that? Give me a thumbs up if you do, thumbs down if you want me to just blaze ahead with boring lecture stuff. Awesome. All right. Yeah, I had a feeling. Yeah. All right. We've definitely got, okay, that is definitely a majority. All right. So let's dig in. By the way, most of this will show up in Appendix A of my book. I'm still working on how to actually format the diagrams so that they're actually viewable.